figures for you, the latest and greatest, on how we intend to make whole the public schools who have seen an unexpected increase in their enrollments this year. And he'll give you what we've calculated to be the final numbers we think are which we'll propose in Senate Bill 189. Senator Cruz's bill will clean up the problem with the federal government's refusal to recognize what has been an alternative diploma that for at least 12% of our kids year after year has allowed them to graduate from high school. Under the federal government's rules, that can no longer take place. So we're adapting to that to make sure that these kids don't fall through the cracks and can still get a high school diploma. And he'll explain the details of that as well. With regard to protecting our citizens' constitutional rights, Senator Brade's Senate Bill 99 deals with the attempt to clean up the mess in Indiana's forfeiture laws that has been created by a federal judge's ruling that placed at least enjoined a portion of that law. He hopes to balance the needs of law enforcement, which are real in this area, with also the constitutional rights of the people of Indiana. He'll explain that bill momentarily as well. And finally, Senate Bill 1, Senator Alting's Sunday sales bill, really needs no explanation, but he's here to answer questions about that and to lay out the premises of that bill for all of you. So after all the bills have been explained, we'll let each of the senators explain their bills. Then we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. We'll begin with Senator Houchin and her inspect bill. Senator Houchin.
Thank you, Senator Long. It's no secret we're in the midst of an opiate crisis. Indiana ranks high on many positive measures, best tax climate in the Midwest, best states to do business, but we also, unfortunately, rank high for the overprescription of opiates. That's why I filed Senate Bill 221. The numbers are staggering and contribute to our addiction and heroin epidemic. Senate Bill 221 requires all practitioners who wish to prescribe opiates to register with INSPECT, our prescription drug monitoring program, and will phase in over a 3-year period mandatory searches of the INSPECT report for any prescriber of opiates. And we do hope this will help to curb the overprescribing of these very addictive drugs and help us as one attempt to combat this opiate epidemic. There are a number of measures this session which are notable. I'm pleased that this is included as part of the agenda and also Governor Holcomb's agenda as we tackle this epidemic.
Thank you, Erin. We'll move now to the workforce development area, and first up will be Senator Ross talking about his computer science bill, and followed by Senator Eckerty.
Thank you, Senator Long. Senate Bill 172 is a computer programming bill that will require high schools to offer a computer programming course. It's not mandated that students take it. It'll be an elective. It begins in 2021. The second part of this bill is it creates a fund to skill up the teachers across the state to be able to teach the class. I think as we look at the recent information we get through the media, that Indiana is looked at as a tech hub, or being looked at as a tech hub. And as well as Senator Long has mentioned, there's no secret that workforce is an issue in the state of Indiana. So this requirement for high schools to offer this type of a computer programming class only solidifies the desire for Indiana to be able to compete in the workforce and as well across the United States as well to skill up students so that we have a workforce that's ready to meet the demand.
Senator Eckerty.
Thank you, excuse me. Thank you, Senator Long, and thank you to those of you who are here this morning. We have basically 4 principal areas of the bill, Senate Bill 50, that we will be proposing here soon. The first will deal with the Frank O'Bannon 21st Century Scholars Fund. What we would like to do there is to expand the eligibility for these scholarship programs so students can use them to obtain certificates and credentials for career and technical fields. We would give students more options to take advantage of these scholarships through doing this. There would be also no provisions for stacking and or credit-bearing credentials for a student to qualify for these programs. The second would be the establishment of a commission for career and technical training. We would include Ivy Tech, Vincennes, the high school CTE programs, the high school CTE centers, as well as workforce-related training programs. All of those would fall under this newly created commission. We would propose that the commission be based and built up from, on their board, from mostly business and industry. We would also recommend some appointments from the General Assembly and various education and workforce agencies. The next item would be that of career counseling. We recognize that we have some problems in the K-12 system space with counseling. We need more. We need a more robust system. And we're looking at a couple different prototypes, one of which was from Batesville, Indiana, which was a collaborative effort between industry, the high schools, Ivy Tech, and Vincennes to create a better pathway. We'll look at some other programs as well. The last item is in the area of Pell Grants, and we're going to propose that we set up a special commission to study extensively the use of Pell Grants and how we can make those more efficient, how we can deliver them more efficiently, so that a person can get into a field of study with a credential certificate, qualify for Pell Grants, and not be overly encumbered by other classes that they didn't want or didn't need, or that their employer didn't want them to have or didn't need. And then there's a couple of tax credits. We're going to take a pretty good look at an employer training tax credit, an employee relocation tax credit, and finally, we're going to take a look at the possibility of establishing a commission to do a really deep dive, hard study on all workforce development spending programs in the state of Indiana. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Eckley. Next up, we'll have Senator Mishler talking about funding for our public schools, followed by Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Senator Long. Senate Bill 189 addresses the increase in the enrollment in the school funding formula. We saw an increase in our estimates in traditional public schools of 6,000 students, and then we saw a decrease in our estimate in charters of 3,000 and a decrease in our estimate of choice of 800. So the net was 2,200 more students than estimated. The spend would still be currently at $7.1 billion, but when you add 2,200 more students, it takes the per pupil amount down, so the schools wouldn't receive quite as much money because they'd have less per pupil. A lot of these increases were in schools that have seen significant decreases, like IPS. We'll see like an increase of like 1,200 students, and they've had a decrease over the past several budgets. I think Fort Wayne Community is about 116. So we're seeing an increase in schools that have traditionally seen a decrease. In the budget, we allowed for up to $25 million to be transferred from the tuition reserve fund if the choice scholarships would take the foundation down. So in this bill, what we do, we just add, or if we underestimate the ADM count over the biennium. So currently, everybody asked me where we're at. The current number with the ADM count is 16 million. And the only numbers we don't have yet would be the special education, and we'll have those in February. But just a rough number for myself, I just took the 2,200 students, said if for some reason every one of them was moderately in the moderate category, that came to 5 million more. So we really don't know. That was for my own numbers. So we really don't know what that number will be till February, so we don't have a total, but it stands at 16 million right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mishler. Senator Cruz.
Thank you. I filed Senate Bill 177, which is going to make sure that Indiana high school graduates don't fail and fall behind because of the new federal law under the Every Student Succeeds Act, which we normally call ESSA. We currently have 4 different diplomas at Indiana, and what this bill will do, it'll convert that into one diploma. And the federal government law says that you have to use whatever most of the students get in Indiana. That particular diploma is the one they're using to determine their graduation rates and potentially funding. And so this will create the Indiana diploma. And the Indiana diploma will be the basic general diploma, and then we will add things to the diploma. If you get Core 40, if you get academic honors, or if you get the career honors. So this will be one diploma. We think this will prevent us from having a failure of 12% less graduation rate. And so we think this is good for the students in Indiana. And I don't think it's going to hurt anybody academically. If anybody wants to go to college, they're still going to have to get the Core 40. So they have to have that Core 40 sticker on their general Indiana diploma. So I think this is a good thing for our students, so that doesn't hurt the students and doesn't hurt the funding here in the state of Indiana.
It has support too, doesn't it, Dennis?
Yes, Superintendent of Public Instruction Jennifer McCormick has written me, said she fully supports this bill and is behind it 100%.
Thank you. So moving from education to the Constitution and criminal law, Senator Bray will talk about his forfeiture law.
Thank you, Senator Long. Indiana has long had civil forfeiture laws on the books, and these laws allow law enforcement and prosecutors to seize the property, both personal and real estate, connected to crimes. They can seize both the tools that the criminals use to commit the crimes as well as the fruits of that criminal labor. Over the years, the forfeiture laws have been an invaluable tool in a fight to stop organized crime and to allow law enforcement to seize the assets of these organizations, such as gangs and drug rings. Unfortunately, a federal court in the summer of 2017 struck down a portion of our civil forfeiture laws, primarily for due process reasons. I am happy to say that over the summer we had already set a summer study committee to deal with exactly that issue. And Senate Bill 99 is the product, or the work product of that summer study committee. It tries to balance, as Senator Long previously said, it tries to balance the substantial interests of a personal and our citizens in Indiana to own its property, both real and personal, without any right or interference from the state. But it also allows the law enforcement and the prosecutors to go in and take those assets from criminal action so that they can begin to fight crime more effectively. And I'm happy to say we worked closely with the prosecutors and law enforcement over the summer, and we think we've got a product that's going to work very well for Indiana.
Thank you, Senator Bray. Finally, Senator Alting will speak on Sunday sales.
Thank you, Senator Long. Well, this is a bill that I began working on shortly after session of last year. And coupled with that, as you well know, I serve on a summer study committee in the summer with Senator Gard as chairman of that. And without question, the summer study committee was a valuable tool in getting testimony from all entities of people around the state, and it was unanimous that it was simply the time to do a Sunday sales bill. So I would take great pride in being the author of that bill, and simplicity, I say, is always the key to an alcohol bill. Therefore, what this does basically is everything that we do in 6 days on selling alcohol, we're going to 7, with only the change from 12 to 8. And that is the store hours of which you can sell. Same people can sell it. On that 7th day, the only change is that's from 12 noon to 8 o'clock. Thank you.
So we have, as you can see, a number of issues here we would like to promote, but there are obviously substantially larger agenda out there as well. And we'll look forward to working with all our senators to get these bills, the right ones, moved and send to our friends in the House. With that, let's take any questions you may have.
On the issue of civil forfeiture, I know there's always been some back and forth about the standard. Is it clear, convincing evidence that this property was used, possibly in the crime versus a higher standard? What agreement did you guys reach that helps the prosecutors but also protects due process?
Well, there's a number of things that help protect due process in this. For example, we've never had a scenario where a judge has to find probable cause before or early on in the process. Now, within 7 days, there has to be a probable cause affidavit found, and the judge has to find that there's probable cause to have seized the property. If the judge doesn't find that, the property has to go back to the individual. So that's the standard that's one of the primary standards we're using.
Well, that's a great question. This is a bill that I brought last year after seeing staggering numbers in my own community for the overprescribing of opiates. At that time, I started doing some research on the prescription drug monitoring program and our use of that. I found that at that time, only about 14% of practitioners eligible to write prescriptions for opiates were actually registered with our prescription drug monitoring program. That number has increased to above 40% at this point. So we are moving in the right direction. I think with the implementation that Governor Holcomb announced last summer, where we are integrating the prescription drug monitoring program directly into electronic health records. It makes these searches that doctors saw as onerous to patient care take what used to be 2 to 5 minute searches down to instant searches. And so we are phasing that in over a 3-year period to match the phase-in of integration. The first phase will be emergency rooms and pain clinics. The next phase will be hospitals systems. And finally, the third phase will be family care or private practice doctors.
Oh, I just randomly picked those because those are the ones that have seen the largest kind of decline in their ADM over the past several budgets. So I just, I'm always asked about IPS, so I just picked those. There's others that saw increases as well. Well, the money's for all students, though, because what happens is if you add 2,200 students and you still spend $7.1 billion, it just lowers the per pupil. So what this bill does, it backfills that. So if I have the same amount of students I had last year, so if I had 1,500 students last year, I have even 1,400 this year, so I have a decline, I still get more money because my per pupil amount will go up when I backfill. So every school will see an increase with this bill.
On the issue of Sunday sales and that noon to 8, is there going to be any adjustment for Indiana being in 2 time zones? Because if you're up in the region or say Evansville, you're kind of waiting an hour behind. You know, if you're a Bears fan, you're going to need alcohol as soon as humanly possible before that game starts at 12 o'clock.
Yeah, that's a great question, and you know that's why we have committee hearings, is to have dialogue like that and bring that out. I know one concern I had just overall with the hours, you know, in a lot of our areas where we have lakes and boating's important, a lot of people like to start earlier than 12 noon, right, to get their ice chests loaded and do what they need to do, and the 12 o'clock may not fit that frame. But keep in mind, one of the reasons why they wanted to go an 8-hour shift is simply because it's easier to put employees in for an 8-hour shift versus 10 hours or 12 hours. So that's a good question. It's something that we'll be addressing in Wednesday's meeting.
Or you give them 16 hours so we can get 2 shifts.
Yeah.
You could. I do think that that's a nod toward the fact that the package stores will have to be creating an extra shift and the other stores won't because they're already open. So.
We've been learning more about the issues that DCS is now facing and the influx of kids into that system. What are the goals of this session to help deal with that or, you know, move forward the investigation and what's going on there affecting all these families?
Well, we'll talk about it. I'm happy to talk about that, although that's not on the agenda, but it is an important issue for us, and it is something we've obviously are thinking about constantly. Last week, we had a fairly robust discussion in the Senate here between Senator Lannon and myself just on the role the legislature can or should play, given that the governor's office has reached out and through the Casey Foundation has hired probably the preeminent analyst of all departments of children's services or whatever they're called in other states. And they expect to have a report, and it's going to be a forensic analysis of the entire operation of DCS. They expect to have a report likely after we're out of session, simply because there's a lot to cover. But they have started already. So I think our goal will be, A, to keep the legislature fully informed and apprised of what's going on while this report goes on. The Speaker, who will be chairman of the Legislative Council, has proposed that this report be completely vetted in front of Leg Council, which is made up of all 4 caucuses, ours and D's, House and Senate, when the report comes out, so that can be publicly vetted, have all the key players in place to answer any and all questions we may have. I expect that as this goes forward in the next couple of months, we will have several of our key people, key senators and House members, ours and D's, involved in staying abreast of what is going on with this investigation so that the legislature and its leadership is kept informed. I think there will be opportunities for that from what I understand. But I do think it's important to recognize that the legislature has limitations in what it can do, other than draw attention to something, to actually find out and help transform this agency. I said last week I've been in 22 sessions now. This is my 22nd year. and DCS, or it's under its previous names, has always been an issue. It's always been a problem for 5 governors. But it's exacerbated today by the opiate crisis, where 80% of these additional problems are directly attributed to that. So, you know, we're facing some old issues in some new ways. Caseworkers are almost always the problem. We're down caseworkers again because we can't keep them because it's such a miserable job. And so we need to identify how to keep them and train them up, provide better support for them, I think, is a key part of this. But we'll wait for this analysis to provide the final answers. The legislature is involved, but I think we should play our role, which is to draw attention to it, ask the tough questions, but let this analysis go forward with the hopes that maybe we can finally crack this very difficult nut. It is critically important.
If a legislative change is needed, are you anticipating a special session, or are you comfortable waiting until 2019?
Well, I think the only area where we might need something is money. And as we said, we've transferred nearly $600 million over the past year into this agency to make up for some budget shortfalls, but also to beef up the expenditures we're seeing, you know, on a variety of levels. So, you know, if it came to that, I'd certainly be willing to do it, but I don't anticipate that right now. We'll wait and see what this report calls for. And if it is, the governor is the person who would call it, and I don't think he'll hesitate if he feels that's necessary. But again, I think we're ahead of the, you know, a little bit of ourselves in trying to anticipate that right now.
Have you discussed the possibility of a special session?
Not yet, because we don't know if one will be needed. I think we're going to have to wait and see. I'm not opposed to anything if it helps us address this problem, but again, the governor's person has to call it, and I think he's waiting for the information he needs to be able to decide if that's necessary or not. So we'll see. But I expect a fast report and hopefully a thorough one from what everyone tells me, the best organization in the country to do this. So.
Resolution been introduced over the House that would call for a study committee on medical marijuana. I know that's not on your list of 5 priorities. What is the feel of the Senate Republicans on not legalize it, but just a study of the legalization of marijuana for medicinal purposes?
Well, it's an HR, not an HCR, so it won't be coming to the Senate. We're not going to have our own resolution. But once that's out there, if it were to pass, it certainly is available for a study in front of Ledge Council next year. So we'll just wait and see what happens, but we'll let the House handle that one this year.
Senator Long, 2 members of your caucus filed a redistricting bill. Will that have a chance of getting into the session?
I haven't talked to Senator Walker. I suspect it will. This is one of those things where we'll want to talk with our caucus as well about the general feeling about the commission. There are questions, as there always are, about this. What would the role of the legislature be, knowing that the Indiana Constitution does require the legislature to draw the districts? Okay, and that's unequivocal. So we have to deal with that issue. Would what we were doing, if we were to change things, be constitutional? There could be a challenge. We could lose in court on that. So do you need an amendment or not? I think those are questions we still have to answer. But the general discussion about it, I think, is relevant. I'm not opposed to having that hearing. I'll talk to Senator Walker about it, but our caucus is going to weigh on that as well, and we'll decide what the caucus wants to do.
Senator Ross, could you tell me, on the computer literacy you're growing, how many schools are not offering a program?
Jeff, come up here. Yeah.
Sorry, I have no idea how many schools are not offering a computer programming or computer science program at this stage. No idea.
So we're doing a bill to require it, but we don't even know whether they're already doing it?
Some very well may be doing it. In fact, I'm certain there are. There is no legislation prohibiting schools from doing that today. What we're simply saying is we're looking off into the future with the behavior, the economic climate, I guess, if you will, that exists in Indiana right now and where we're headed. I don't think anyone can deny that the necessity of students having this background is something that's desirable.
I'll say one thing, too. I mean, when you talk to the people about the need for coding, you know, and of course it crosses more than just kids, they'll tell you that you either have the acumen or you don't, but you can pull anybody from different walks of life and determine whether they have that skill set. And it's amazing how people come from a variety of jobs. Maybe they need a little skilling up on some things, but they have the acumen to do it. And so the private sector is very involved in it, but they all feel that this is important to offer this class in all of our high schools. And I think that the sense is that it isn't offered in very many high schools right now, and it needs to be. So we're going to incentivize, and as Senator Rotz said, training our teachers as well and providing that training to them at no cost to the schools, the teachers, is also a very important piece of this.
Is the private sector going to be at all involved in providing that kind of training for educators?
That's a good question. I would assume yes, as far as being as far as the classes and schooling and skilling up the teachers. They'd be the best people to do it. We'll see how it goes. I think this is the first step, but I don't know that every student needs to be a coder or have those skills, but I think they need to be offered as part of the overall recognition that this is a key part of the future workforce, and we don't have enough people doing it. And it should be an all-out call to find people from all walks of life, especially our kids, to give them that introduction to it and see if it's something they want to do in life. We need more coders in the state. There's no question about it.
Is computer science more important than cursive writing?
Yes, it is. But I think you'll talk to a variety of teachers on that, and they'll say that it's still important to be able to have the skill of writing. I personally think somebody needs to be able to write their signature, but a lot of people say that's just going to go away. I don't know. We'll see. The world's changing so fast that, what I think is probably irrelevant 10 hours from now, and it's just a sense for many people that that's still a skill you need to have. And the educators are split on it. Some will say, yeah, I agree, and some will say, no, the future is going to change and you won't have to, you'll push a button and your signature will pop up, as it does now on a mortgage. So.
The Sunday sales bill is Senate Bill 1. Is it fair to say that that's your top priority then?
No, it's not our top priority, but it was important to say that we're recognizing that its time has come, and I certainly feel that way. It seems there's a consensus building around that in the private sector amongst all the players in alcohol. Certainly the commission believed that this summer, so it recognizes that. But no, it's not the most important. The most important issues are workforce development, education, and the DCS matter, I would say. So. What was that again?
The House's student press freedom bill. Do you have any say on whether that will have a change?
I have no idea. I don't know where that bill will go. So.
Ron, where are you guys on cold beer?
Pardon me?
Back in alcohol for a second. Sunday sales, the major priority was not the top priority. Cold beer is getting a hearing, but isn't. What's the distinction?
Well, there's consensus on one and not on the other. Ronnie, you want to talk about that for a minute?
It's a good question. I take alcohol bills pretty serious. That's no secret. And as I was reflecting after the summer study committee of what took place there, we had an incredible positive dialogue, and just in terms of people from all entities getting involved. And it came to my attention in this thought process that really Senator Randolph and I were the only two senators that serve on that heard any discussion on cold beer. Then I took it a step farther in my thinking that I've probably been dealing with alcohol bills longer than anyone in the Senate or the House, some 20 years, that I've heard cold beer discussions in summer study committees at least a dozen times, at least. But no one on my public policy committee has in the Senate, ever, besides Senator Randolph from Gary and myself. So I thought it was due time after having that to have that dialogue, and more importantly, to have a vote and see what the Senate Public Policy Committee believes the future of cold beer sales, at least during this session. But without a question, I think it needed to come to public policy and have more people in the dialogue and the discussion that are elected to push one of these buttons to get them involved in whether that's good public policy or not.
If I just heard you correctly, you're committing to bringing that to a vote, whether it's up or down?
I am. I certainly am.
Other questions? Thank you all very much for coming today. We look forward to a great session and talking with you further.